The pounding on my front door started at 2:17 in the morning. Not a knock, not a polite request. It was a violent, repeated banging that shook the entire house. I woke up instantly. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. The house was completely dark, my wife was sitting upright beside me, and our 2 kids were already crying from the noise downstairs. Then I heard someone shouting outside. "Open the door. HOA compliance inspection." I froze. My wife looked at me and whispered, "Did they just say HOA?" I got out of bed and walked toward the hallway. Another bang hit the front door. "Open up. You are being removed from the property." That sentence changed everything. Removed from the property? At 2 in the morning? By the HOA? I had owned that house for almost 8 years. My name was on the deed. I paid the mortgage. I paid the property taxes. I paid the HOA dues. I had never missed a payment, never ignored an official violation, and never had a court order telling me I had to leave. Yet there were people outside my home claiming they had the authority to force my family out. My wife grabbed my arm. "Don't open it." I wasn't planning to. Then came another shout. "We have authorization from the association. You need to vacate immediately." I walked downstairs but stopped several feet from the door. I didn't touch the handle. Instead, I looked through the side window. There were at least 6 people outside. 3 wore jackets with the HOA's logo. 2 others were dressed like private security guards. And standing in the middle of them was the HOA president, a woman named Valerie Cross. I recognized her immediately. Valerie had been elected HOA president about a year earlier, and from the moment she took control, she acted like the neighborhood belonged to her. She had sent violation notices over trash cans. She had complained about basketball hoops. She had demanded homeowners repaint fences because she didn't like the shade. But this was different. This wasn't a letter. This wasn't a fine. This wasn't an inspection. They were standing outside my house in the middle of the night telling my family to leave. I quietly pulled out my phone and started recording. Then Valerie shouted again, "We know you're inside." I stayed silent. She continued, "You have 10 minutes to come out voluntarily, or we're entering the property." My wife looked at me. "Can they actually do that?" "No." I said it quietly, but I wasn't completely sure what they had planned. So I didn't argue with them through the door. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't open the door. I simply kept recording. Then something happened that made my stomach drop. One of the security guards walked toward our side gate. I watched him reach for the latch. That was the moment I realized they weren't there to talk. They actually intended to enter. I immediately called the local authorities and explained that a group of people claiming to represent our HOA were outside my private residence in the middle of the night and were threatening to remove my family from our home. While I was on the phone, Valerie began yelling again. "This is your final warning." The guard at the side gate pushed it open. I shouted through the closed door, "Do not enter my property." He stopped. Valerie stepped forward. "You don't have a choice anymore." I replied, "You don't have permission." She laughed. "Permission? The HOA owns this community." That sentence would become one of the most important things she ever said. Because I recorded it, and I had no idea yet how badly that statement was going to hurt her. The guard stepped through the gate. I immediately told the dispatcher what was happening. Then Valerie pointed toward my front door. "Take them out." The guard walked toward the house. My wife pulled the kids upstairs. I stayed downstairs, recording everything. The guard reached the porch. He looked directly at the camera mounted above our garage. Then he looked at the front door. He raised his hand, and suddenly the entire situation changed. Because headlights appeared at the end of the street. A vehicle was approaching, then another. The authorities had arrived. Valerie immediately stepped backward. The security guards stopped moving. And for the first time that night, nobody was shouting. 2 officers approached the group. One asked, "Who is the homeowner?" I opened the door only after the officers identified themselves. I stepped outside. Valerie immediately started talking. "This homeowner is violating association rules. The board has authorized removal." The officer looked at her. "Do you have a court order?" Valerie hesitated. "We have HOA authority." "That's not what I asked." She didn't answer. The officer repeated himself. "Do you have a court order authorizing you to remove these occupants from this residence?" Valerie looked toward one of the security guards. Nobody answered. The officer then asked me for identification and proof that I lived there. I showed him my driver's license. I explained that I owned the property. I also showed him documentation confirming ownership. The officer reviewed everything. Then he turned toward Valerie. "You cannot remove someone from their home simply because you have an HOA dispute." Valerie became angry. "You don't understand. They're in violation." The officer responded calmly. "Then take it through the proper legal process." Valerie pointed toward me. He refuses to comply. The officer looked at me. Have you received any legal eviction order? No. Any court order? No. Any notice from a government authority ordering you to vacate? No. The officer turned back toward Valerie. Then this isn't an eviction. Valerie's face changed. She knew she had lost control of the situation. But she wasn't finished. She pulled out a folder. We have documentation. The officer looked at it. I watched him flip through several pages. Then he asked her a question. When was this authorization issued? Valerie gave him a date. The officer frowned. During business hours? She nodded. And why did you wait until 2 in the morning to enforce it? Valerie didn't answer. The officer handed the papers back. This doesn't authorize you to enter the home. Valerie tried to argue. The officer raised his hand. Do not enter this property without the homeowner's permission or proper legal authority. That should have ended the night. But Valerie made one final mistake. She pointed at me and said, "We'll have him out by the end of the week." I looked directly at her. "No, you won't." She smiled. "You'll see." I didn't know it yet, but those words were the beginning of the biggest legal fight our neighborhood had ever seen. The officers eventually ordered everyone to leave. Valerie protested. The guards packed up their equipment. The HOA vehicles disappeared down the street. And I stood in my driveway watching their taillights vanish. My wife came outside. She looked exhausted. The kids were still awake upstairs. She asked me, "Is it over?" I looked at the recording still running on my phone. No, it just started. The next morning, I began investigating everything. I wanted to know why the HOA president believed she had the authority to remove my family from our home. I wanted to know what was inside that folder. And most importantly, I wanted to know what they were trying to hide. I contacted an attorney and showed him the video. He watched the entire recording without saying a word. When it ended, he replayed the moment Valerie said the HOA owned the community. Then he replayed the moment she claimed they had authorization to remove us. Finally, he looked at me. Do you have your original purchase documents? Yes. Your deed? Yes. Your HOA declaration? Yes. Bring all of it. I brought him everything. He spent hours reviewing the documents. Then he stopped. He looked at one particular page. This is interesting. What? He pointed toward a paragraph in the original declaration. The HOA has enforcement authority over certain covenant violations. I nodded. Okay, but it doesn't have ownership authority over your house. I already knew that. Then he pointed to another section. And this is even more important. What does it say? He explained that the association could pursue certain remedies through the legal system, but that did not automatically give its officers the power to physically enter a private residence or remove occupants. Then he asked me something I hadn't considered. Did they ever send you a formal notice before tonight? Yes. About what? A landscaping violation. He looked at me. That's it? That's it. What did you do? I fixed it. He leaned back. Then why were they trying to remove you? That was the question. And the more we investigated, the stranger the answer became. Because the landscaping violation wasn't the real reason. It was a distraction. 3 days later, my attorney discovered something buried in the HOA records. The board had held an emergency meeting 2 weeks before the midnight incident. At that meeting, they discussed my property. Not my landscaping, not my driveway, not my fence, my actual house. The minutes showed that several board members believed my property was subject to association control beyond ordinary homeowner rights. That sentence made no sense. So we dug deeper. Then we found the document they had been relying on. It was an old amendment. According to Valerie, that amendment gave the association extraordinary authority over several properties in our neighborhood, including mine. There was just one problem. The amendment had never been properly recorded. My attorney checked the county records. Nothing. He checked the original declaration. Nothing. He checked the chain of title. Nothing. Then he discovered something even more important. The version the HOA had been circulating was not the same version filed with the county. Someone had altered it. We didn't know who. But suddenly the midnight raid made sense. They weren't enforcing a normal HOA rule. They were trying to establish control over my property using a document that appeared to have no legal standing. My attorney told me not to confront Valerie. Instead, we prepared. We sent a formal notice demanding that the HOA cease unauthorized interference with my property. We requested copies of every document they claimed gave them authority. We requested meeting minutes. We requested enforcement records. We requested the name of the attorney who supposedly approved the midnight operation. And then we waited. The HOA responded with a letter. It was aggressive. They claimed I was misrepresenting the association's lawful authority. They claimed the midnight visit was an authorized compliance action. And they warned me that refusing to cooperate could result in further enforcement. My attorney smiled when he read that sentence. Good, I asked. Good? He nodded. They put it in writing. That was exactly what we needed. Because now the HOA had officially admitted that the nighttime operation was intentional. Not a misunderstanding, not a mistake, not a random visit, an organized action. They had planned it, they had sent people to my home. They had tried to force my family out. And they had documented their own explanation. So we filed the appropriate legal action challenging their claimed authority and seeking an order preventing further unauthorized interference with the property. The HOA suddenly became much quieter. Valerie stopped appearing at my house. The security company stopped coming. But then, just when I thought the situation was finally under control, I received another letter. This one was different. The HOA claimed my property had somehow become subject to a newly discovered restriction. And they demanded that I surrender access to a portion of my land. I read the letter twice. Then I called my attorney. He told me not to respond yet. Bring me the original deed. I did. He compared it with the HOA's documents. Then he smiled. Now we know exactly what they're trying to do. What? They're not trying to remove you anymore. He pointed to the map attached to the HOA letter. They're trying to claim part of your property. And that was when I realized the midnight raid had never really been about kicking us out. It had been about intimidating us. They wanted us frightened enough to leave voluntarily. They wanted us to believe they had authority. They wanted us to surrender before we ever asked for proof. But we didn't. And now they had a much bigger problem. Because we had the deed. We had the county records. We had the video. We had their letters. We had their meeting minutes. And we had the exact document they had been using to justify everything. My attorney placed the paperwork on the table and said, now we make them prove every single claim they've made. The legal battle was about to begin. And when the HOA finally had to explain in court why its president had arrived at my house at 2:17 in the morning with private security and instructions to remove my family, the answer they gave shocked everyone in the room. The courtroom went completely silent. The judge looked down at the documents in front of him, then back at the HOA's attorney. You are telling this court, he said slowly, that the association believed it had authority to remove these homeowners from their residence? The HOA attorney shifted in his chair. Your Honor, the association believed there were circumstances that justified immediate intervention. Immediate intervention? Yes. At 2:17 in the morning? The attorney paused. That was the time the compliance team arrived. The judge leaned back. And what emergency existed? Nobody answered. My attorney stood up. Your Honor, there was no emergency. There was no court order. There was no eviction proceeding. There was no government action. There wasn't even a valid violation that justified what happened. The HOA attorney immediately objected. That's an unfair characterization. My attorney calmly placed a document on the table. Then let's look at their own records. The judge motioned for him to continue. This is the association's meeting record from 2 weeks before the incident. It shows that the board discussed removing my clients from their home. The judge looked at the page. Then he looked at the HOA attorney. Is this document authentic? The attorney hesitated. Yes, Your Honor. My attorney placed another document beside it. And this is the original declaration recorded with the county. The judge compared the two. They don't match. Exactly. The HOA attorney tried to explain that an amendment had later changed the association's powers. My attorney immediately asked, where is the recorded amendment? The attorney said it had been filed. My attorney replied, then show us the recording number. The attorney didn't have one. That was the moment I knew the entire strategy was collapsing. The judge asked the HOA attorney again. Where is the recorded amendment? We're attempting to locate that information. The judge's expression hardened. You attempted to remove a family from their home based on a document you cannot establish was legally recorded? The attorney began speaking faster. Your Honor, the association acted in good faith. My attorney interrupted. Good faith doesn't create property rights. The judge nodded. That's correct. I was sitting behind my attorney, listening to every word. My wife sat beside me. She squeezed my hand. For weeks, we'd been afraid. We had wondered whether we would have to fight the people who were supposed to manage our neighborhood. Now we were watching them struggle to explain themselves. But the hearing wasn't over. The judge turned toward the HOA attorney. I want to understand something. Who authorized the security personnel to go to the residence? The attorney looked at Valerie. Valerie was sitting behind him. The judge noticed. Ms. Cross? Valerie stood. Yes, Your Honor. Did you authorize the operation? She swallowed. I authorized the compliance team to enforce the association's rights. Did you personally instruct them to go to the residence? Yes. At 2:17 in the morning? Yes. Why? Valerie started explaining that she believed we were preparing to make unauthorized changes to the property. The judge stopped her. Did you contact the homeowners first? Yes. Show me the notice. The HOA attorney handed him a document. The judge read it. Then he looked up. This notice doesn't order the homeowners to vacate. No, Your Honor. It doesn't authorize entry. No. It doesn't mention any emergency. No. So why did you send security personnel? Valerie looked at her attorney. Then back at the judge. We believed immediate action was necessary. The judge shook his head. Belief is not legal authority. Those 5 words landed harder than anything else that day. My attorney then introduced the video. The courtroom lights were lowered. The recording began. The judge watched Valerie standing outside my house. He watched the security guards. He heard her announce that we had 10 minutes to leave. He heard her say the HOA owned the community. He watched the guard open our side gate. Then he heard me telling them not to enter. The video continued. And then the authorities arrived. The judge watched the entire interaction. When the recording ended, there was silence. The judge asked, "Is this recording accurate?" My attorney answered, "Yes." The HOA attorney didn't dispute it. The judge looked directly at Valerie. You told these homeowners they would be removed from their home. Valerie nodded. Yes. On what legal authority? She couldn't answer. Her attorney tried. Your Honor, the association's position was based on its interpretation of the governing documents. The judge looked back at the documents. An interpretation that appears unsupported by the recorded declaration. My attorney stood. That's exactly our position. Then he introduced another piece of evidence. The county recorder's certification. It showed that the amendment Valerie relied upon had never been recorded in the form presented by the HOA. The HOA's attorney asked for a short recess. The judge granted it. We walked into the hallway. My wife looked at me. Are we actually winning? I said, I think so. But I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because there was still one thing bothering me. How had the HOA obtained that altered document? And who had changed it? During the recess, my attorney received an email. He read it once. Then again. His expression changed. What? He handed me his phone. It was from a former HOA board member. The message was short. She said she had information about the amendment. She wanted to meet privately. We met her later that afternoon. She arrived carrying a box of old HOA records. She looked nervous. I should have told someone earlier. My attorney asked, told us what? She opened the box. Inside were copies of board meeting minutes, drafts of amendments, correspondence, invoices and handwritten notes. Then she pulled out a folder. This is the original amendment. I looked at it. It was completely different from the document Valerie had been using. The former board member explained that years earlier, the HOA had discussed expanding its authority. But the proposal had never received the required approval. It had been rejected. The board had abandoned it. Then, according to her, someone later created a revised version. A version that appeared to give the HOA much broader control. My attorney asked, who created the revised version? She hesitated. I don't know. Who had access to the files? The president. Who was president at the time? She gave us a name. It wasn't Valerie. It was the developer who had originally built the neighborhood. That changed everything. Because suddenly this wasn't just about one aggressive HOA president. There could have been a much older scheme behind it. The developer had retained certain interests in portions of the community. And some of those interests appeared to overlap with the properties that the HOA had recently started targeting. My attorney studied the documents. But Valerie wasn't giving up. Instead, she called a special HOA meeting. Every homeowner received a notice. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday morning. The notice said the board would discuss property compliance and community security. I knew exactly what that meant. Valerie wanted to control the narrative. She wanted the homeowners to believe we were the problem. So we went. The meeting was packed. Dozens of homeowners were sitting in the community hall. Valerie stood at the front. She looked confident. She told everyone that the association had acted to protect the community. She claimed my family had refused to cooperate. She claimed we had ignored multiple warnings. Then she said something that shocked me. These homeowners are attempting to undermine the authority of this association. I stood up. I have one question. Valerie looked at me. What? Show everyone the document that gives you the authority to remove us from our home. The room went quiet. Valerie said, our attorney has already addressed that. I replied, then show the document. She didn't. I asked again. Show the recorded amendment. Her face tightened. A homeowner in the back stood up. I want to see it too. Another homeowner spoke. So do I. Then another. Suddenly, people weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at Valerie. One man asked, why were security guards at his house at 2 in the morning? Valerie said it was a compliance matter. He responded, "Why didn't you call the police?" She said the HOA had its own enforcement procedures. Someone else shouted, "HOA rules aren't the law." The room erupted. Valerie tried to regain control. But the homeowners were asking questions she couldn't answer. Then my attorney stood up. He didn't make a speech. He simply placed copies of the county recorded declaration on a table. Everyone here can read the same document the court reviewed. He placed another document beside it. This is the version the HOA claims gives it extraordinary authority. Then he placed a third document down. This is the county certification showing what was actually recorded. People gathered around the table. They compared the pages. The difference was obvious. The room went silent. Then one homeowner said, "So which one is real?" My attorney answered, "That's exactly what the court is determining." Valerie looked furious. But then someone asked the question that none of us expected. What happened to the other properties on that map? I looked at my attorney. He looked at me. The former board member had told us about 12 properties. But nobody else in that room knew about the map. Someone had apparently seen it. And within seconds, homeowners were demanding answers. Valerie's face went pale. The meeting descended into chaos. People wanted copies of the records. Homeowners demanded explanations. Several board members started arguing with each other. Then one board member quietly walked over to me. He whispered, "I think I know where the original files are." I asked him where. He looked toward the locked storage room behind the meeting hall. "Down there." He pointed at the door. "And if what you're looking for is inside, you need to see it before Valerie does." We walked toward the storage room. The key was still hanging from the property manager's office. The board member unlocked the door. Inside were boxes of old records covered in dust. We started searching. Minutes, contracts, maps, invoices, old architectural plans. Then I saw a folder with my property number written on the side. I pulled it out. My attorney opened it. The first page was a property acquisition proposal. The second page was a development map. And the third page contained a list of 12 homeowners. My name was number 7. But what was written next to my name made my blood run cold. It said, "Priority acquisition, resistance expected." My attorney stared at the page. Then he slowly turned toward me. "Now we know why they came at night." And before we could read the next page, footsteps suddenly stopped outside the storage room door.